Dear students, welcome to the research methodology class. In our today's lecture, we will discuss the collection of data, methods of collection of data. We know that in our research, we use the different types of the data like primary data and secondary data. In this lecture, we will discuss the nature of the primary and secondary data, and we will also discuss the methods for collection of these types of the data. So the first topic of the today's lecture would be the primary and secondary data. Then we will discuss the types of secondary data, collection of primary data, and out of the methods of collection of the primary data, the observation and the interview. The first topic of today's lecture is the primary and secondary data. So let me discuss the secondary data first. The secondary data is the data that have already been collected for some other purpose. We find the secondary data in different forms. We see that the census data, which is collected by the national authorities, by the national organizations, National Census Organization, for knowing the characteristics of population, but their data is further used for different purposes. So that data becomes secondary when it is used for some other purposes. Similarly, we have the Economic Survey of Pakistan, which is collected, which is prepared by the Finance Division for knowing the economic conditions of the country and to evaluate the 1 year performance of the government. Their data becomes secondary when it is used for research purpose or for some carrying out some projects. We have different types of the secondary data, and the first type is the documentary secondary data. Documentary secondary data include written materials such as notices, correspondence, which is done through the email or some other sources, the minutes of the meetings, report to shareholders, diaries, the transcripts of speeches and administrative and public records. Such data is often used in the research projects that also use primary data collection. The second type of the secondary data is surveys. Surveys refer to the data collected using a survey strategy, usually a questionnaire, that have been already analyzed for their original purpose. Such data normally refer to the organizations, people, or households. It is collected from the people, from the households, or from the organizations, and it is used in many types of the research. It can be collected through the census, continuous or regular surveys. Another type of the secondary data is multiple source secondary data. It can be based entirely on documentary or survey, or can be the combination of both type of the data. The key factors in the different data sets have been combined to form another data set prior to accessing the data. Cohort studies. Data can also be compiled for some population over time using a series of snapshots to form cohort studies. Such studies are relatively rare owing to the difficulty of maintaining contact with members of the cohort from the year to year. Area-based data sets. Multi-source secondary data can also be combined if they have the same geographical basis or to form area or area-based data sets. These are the different types of the secondary data. We can see that we have documentary data, which can be in the form of written materials or non-written materials, and the written materials can be organizations databases such as personal or production, organizational communication such as emails, letters, memos, etc. Similarly, organizational website can provide such type of documentary data. Reports and minutes of the committees, journals, newspapers, diaries, interviews, etc., can provide the documentary secondary data. Similarly, the non-written material of the documentary data can be media accounts, including TV and radio, voice recordings, video recordings, etc. The secondary data is multi-source data. It can be area-based, for example, Financial Times, country reports, government publications, books, journals. It can be time series based, like industry statistic and reports, government publication, European Union publication, books, journals, etc. And or it can be survey. The survey can be census, government census, population census. We have Pakistan Census Organization for this purpose. Similarly, the evaluating the secondary data. If you are using the secondary data, it should be evaluated. So, assess overall suitability of the data to research questions and objectives. So, first of all, pay particular attention to the measurement validity and coverage, including the unmeasured variables. If you consider the data to be definitely unsuitable, do not proceed beyond this stage. If you see that it has not been properly measured, or it includes some unmeasured variables which do not fit your study, then it is better to leave the data and not proceed further. But if you find that it has go through the data and you find that it is according to the stage 1, then go to stage 2, where you evaluate the precise suitability of data for analysis needed to answer the research questions and meet the objectives. So if you want to know whether the data is according to your research questions, where the data fulfills the requirements of your research questions and meet the objectives, then you should pay particular attention to the validity, reliability, and measurement error. If the data do not support the step number 2, stage number 2, if it is not according to your research questions and do not meet the objectives, then you should leave the data and do not proceed beyond this stage. But if the data support this stage number 2, then you should go to the stage number 3, where you judge whether to use the data based on assessment of the costs and benefits in comparison to the alternative resources. If you do not consider the data to be suitable at this stage, then do not proceed beyond this stage 2. That was something about the secondary data. Now we proceed toward the primary data. Dear student, the primary data is the data which can be collected specifically for the purpose of answering a research question and to meet the research objectives. In other words, it is the data which is collected for the first time. It is the data which is collected for the first time for some purpose. The data which we collect through the questionnaires can be referred to as the primary data. The primary data can be collected through different methods, and these methods include the method of observation, the method of questionnaire, and the method of interview. These are the three major methods for collection of the primary data. We come to first the observation method. The observation method is the most commonly used method. In a way, we all observe things around us, but this sort of observation is not scientific observation. It becomes a scientific tool, a method of data collection which it serves a formulated research purpose, is systematically planned and recorded, and is subject to checks on validity and reliability. Means that the observation becomes a scientific tool. We can call it a scientific. When we see things around us, we observe different things, different events in our life, daily life, but this is not observation. It becomes observation when we see things for a specific purpose, for the research purpose, when we plan things systematically and record the observation. It becomes the scientific tool or scientific method. The information is sought in this method by way of investigators' own direct observation without asking from the respondent. For instance, in a study relating to the consumer behavior, the investigator, instead of asking the brand of wristwatch used by respondent, may himself look at the watch. We have different types of the observation, and the first type is the participant observation, in which if the observer observes by making himself more or less a member of the group, he is observing so that he can experience what the members of the group experience. The observation is called the participant observation. Means the observer, the researcher, become a part of the group which he is observing. So such type of the observation is called participant observation, in which the participant himself, the observer, the investigator, the researcher himself involves him in the group and work as a member of the group. Participant observation is qualitative and derives from work of social anthropology early in the 20th century. Its emphasis is on discovering the meanings that people attach to their actions. Merits of the participant observation. The researcher is enabled to record the natural behavior of the group. The researcher can even gather information which could not easily be obtained if he observes in a disintegrated fashion. The researcher can even verify the truth of statements made by informants in context of a questionnaire or schedule. We have the second type is non-participant type of observation, in which the observer observes as a detached envoy, a detached person, without any attempt on his part to experience through the participation what others feel. The observation of this type is often termed as a non-participant observation. In the non-participant observation, the observer observes, but he doesn't become the part of the group, but he observes the group and record the information. Structured observation. In case the observation is characterized by a careful definition of the units to be observed, the style of recording the observation information, standardized condition of observation, and selection of pertinent data of observation, then the observation is called structured observation. In a simple word, we can say the observation is structured one if it is carefully planned, if it is carefully recorded, and if the data to be collected is properly planned. Advantages of structured observation. It can be used by anyone after suitable training in use of the measurement instrument. It is a simple one. It can be carried out simultaneously in different locations. The merit of the structured observation is that it can be used by anyone. It can be conducted simultaneously in different locations. This would present the opportunity of comparison between locations. If it is conducted in different locations, we can compare the locations and it gives reliable results. Structured observation is capable of more than simply observing the frequency of events. It is not just the noting, recording the frequency of the events, but it is a comparison. The method allows the collection of data at the time they occur in their natural setting. Structured observation secures information that most participants would ignore because to them it was too irrelevant. Disadvantages. The observer must be in research setting when the phenomena under study are taking place. The research results are limited to overtaction or surface indicators from which the observer must make inferences. Similarly, the data are slow and expensive to collect. Unstructured observation is another type of the observation when observation is to take place without these characteristics to be sought of in advance. The same is termed as unstructured observation. In the structured observation, we plan in advance. We plan the style of recording, the units to be studied, the way of the observation, the but in the unstructured observation, no such type of the preparation is made in advance. The narrative method of collecting data involves presentation of verbal stimuli and reply in terms of oral responses. This method can be used through personal interviews and, if possible, through telephone interviews, according to Kothari 2004. An interview is a purposeful discussion between two or more people. The use of interviews can help you to gather valid and reliable data that are relevant to your research questions and objectives. Means that an interview is a method of data collection in which we discuss the issues, we discuss the for our purpose with one or more respondents. The interview can be structured, unstructured, or semi-structured. In other words, we have three different types of the interview: the structured interview, unstructured interview, and the semi-structured interview. Let us first discuss the structured interview. Structured interviews use questionnaires based on predetermined and standardized or identical set of questions, and we refer to them as interviewer-administered questions. In structured type of interview, the questions are prepared in advance. The researcher read out each question and then record the response on standardized schedule. Structured interviews are those conducted when it is known at the outset that information is needed. Interviewer has a list of predetermined questions to be asked to the respondent either personally or through the telephone or through the media of a personal computer. Means that the structured interview can be conducted through already prepared questions, the questions prepared in advance, and these questions can be asked from the interviewee personally, face to face, or the same question be asked through the telephone or through email or through some other media. The questions are likely to focus on factors that had surfaced during the unstructured interviews and are considered relevant to the problem. As the respondents express their views, the researcher would note them down. The responses of the respondents are recorded. The same question will be asked of everybody in the same manner. As it is structured, it is prepared in advance, So same type of the questions are asked from all respondents. Sometimes, however, based on the exigencies of the situation, the experienced researcher might take a lead from respondent answer and ask other relevant questions not to the interview protocol. Through this process, new factors might be identified, resulting in a deeper understanding because the during the interview, the researcher come across the come across the truth, come across the information directly. However, to be able to recognize a probable response, the interviewer must comprehend the purpose and goal of each question to the respondent. This is particularly important when a team of trained interviewers conduct the survey. Similarly, another type of the interviews is the semi-structured interviews. In semi-structured interviews, the researcher has a list of themes and questions to be covered, and these may vary from interview to interview. This means that you may omit some questions in particular interviews given a specific organizational context that is encountered in relation to the research topic. The order of questions also be varied depending on the flow of conversation. Unstructured interviews, the another type of the interviews are unstructured interviews. The unstructured interviews are for informal. You would use these to explore in depth a general area in which you are interested. We therefore refer to these as in-depth interviews as well. There is no predetermined list of questions to work through this situation. In such type of interviews, the interview is given the opportunity to talk freely about the events, behavior, or belief in relation to the topic, so that this type of interaction is sometimes called non-directive. It has also to be labeled as informal interview since it is the interview participants' perceptions that guide the conduct of the interview. In comparison to a participant interview, uh, uh, is one where the interviewer directs the interview and the interview responds to the questions of the researcher. The objective of the unstructured interview is to bring some preliminary issues to the surface so that the researcher can determine what variables need further in-depth investigation. Such situations call for unstructured interviews with people concerned. In order to understand the situation, introductory the researcher will interview employees at several levels. Dear student, the material used in this lecture has been taken from Kothari 2004, Saunders 2009, and Sikara 2003.